Hey, what's up guys? So in this video, we're going to go over some of the most frequently asked questions about the Uniden R7. Now that the detector is available, and even before it was available, a lot of you guys have had a bunch of different questions that you've been asking on the forums, on Facebook, down in the comments to all the R7 videos. And so in this video, I pretty much want to go over some of the most frequently asked questions all about the detector. They're questions that may not necessarily need their own individual video, but we can throw all of them together and do one kind of compilation video like this based on your question. So let's get started. Now, the first question has to do with what happens with the text up here on the top left-hand corner of the screen. Right here where there's a speed or the compass or something, it'll actually have a little bit of white text that actually comes and goes as you drive. When I first saw this, I actually thought it was a bug with the display, and a lot of you guys have as well, but it turns out that's an intentional thing that they're doing to help alleviate any chances of burn-in. As you guys know, with these multicolor OLED screens, they look great, but the technology kind of inherently has a limitation to where if text is on screen for a long time, it can kind of burn into the display and stay there permanently even when the text is gone. It was an issue that we saw with the R1 and the R3, and so to help kind of reduce this issue and minimize it, the text actually periodically turns off to let the pixels on the screen rest. Another question about the display you guys have asked, and it's something that I see too, is the middle of the display sometimes tends to be a little bit brighter than the top and the bottom. This actually does look like it's a bug. In one of the earlier beta firmwares, they actually made a change to help fix this, but it hasn't completely resolved it, and a lot of you guys have been asking about this too, so it's not a hardware issue. It is something that I think they need to address in the detector. It's kind of one of the refinements that need to be made, but yes, that is something that they're aware of and they're working on. Speaking of the display, a lot of you guys who have right-hand drive vehicles, if you drive on, well, the left side of the road, different than we do here in the US, you've been concerned about the angle of the display actually turning away from the driver. Now the R7, of course, it's not the only detector that's designed this way, but its display is a little bit different than the V1. Now you'll notice that the displays are actually tilted at pretty similar angles towards, well, us American drivers and away from you guys with right-hand drive vehicles. But the biggest difference I notice is the fact that with the V1, the display, it's actually flush with the front of the detector like this. That's different than the R7 where the display, it's actually slightly recessed into the black plastic housing. Now, because OLEDs compared to LEDs, they're more susceptible to glare and being washed out in the sun, they actually have it recessed to help kind of protect the sunlight from hitting the display and washing it out. Now, one of the side effects is because this part right here where the rear antenna is, it can kind of block the right side of the display if you're looking at the detector from the right. You may actually not be able to see the right edge of the display if you're looking at the detector from the right-hand side. Now that said, you'll notice that you do need to start going at a pretty steep angle until it starts becoming an issue. I do notice it happening though if I pretend I'm in a right-hand drive vehicle and put the detector on the right side of the rearview mirror. If it's on the left side of the rearview mirror and I'm acting as the passenger, that definitely obscures a large portion of the screen, but I only get a little bit of it blocked if it's on the right side, and I just wanted to share this with you guys because a lot of you guys have asked about that. Next, taking a look at power cable compatibility. A lot of you guys have asked about this. For those of you upgrading from the R1 or the R3, you can use the same exact cabling, it'll all work fine. With the R7, they have actually updated the cable to make it a little bit more durable, and I've noticed there are a couple cars where people are noticing that it doesn't actually plug in as well. You'll notice that the tip of the connector is designed a little bit differently now on the new R7 cable. The R7 cable, it's the one where the back side of the plug is actually angled towards the driver, well, a lot like the R7 is. When it comes to powering the detectors, though, all the power stuff is compatible between R1 and R3. Now, what about for those of you guys who are switching to an R7 from another brand? Now, I've done a whole video actually talking about mixing power cables from different brands, whether it's Valentine or Escort or Uniden. You can click the button on screen and watch that, and it goes over a lot of the highlights. The short version is the fact that all of the different power cables, they'll work when it comes to power. You may find some limited compatibility when it comes to things like the remote mute button or the alert LED. Things like that may or may not work properly, and again, watch the video for all the details, but when it comes to power, they all work properly with one exception. The exception that I've seen some people report is if you're using an older Escort live cable with the Bluetooth chip. It's for the older Escort detectors like the Passport X70 or the original Escort Redline, the detectors that don't have Bluetooth built into the detectors. For those detectors, if you wanted Escort Live compatibility, you had to use an older Escort Live cable that has Bluetooth in the power cable. If you're using one of those, it does actually conflict with the R7. But otherwise, if you're using a traditional Escort power cable with just power or even the remote mute and alert stuff, that will work fine to power your detector, but the alert lights and the mute buttons will not necessarily work properly. If you're using a mirror tap cable that plugs into your rearview mirror, those are power only, so those will work just just fine. For those of you guys who want to add a Uniden hardwire cable, there's a couple different options. You can use any old standard power cable that's just power, because they all work fine. All the pinouts are the same for all the different detectors, which is nice, so they don't fry each other if you happen to use the wrong cable or detector or something. If you want a remote mute button in your power cable, so you don't always have to reach up to the side of the detector to mute the detector or manually change the display brightness, there's two different options that are available. The first one is a Uniden branded cable, and there's a little box that it comes with. It has a remote alert LED and remote mute button that you can access. There's also a third-party option from a company called Safe and Sound, and they make a cable that has a remote mute button as well, and it's smaller than the Uniden one. There's a rounded version and there's a flat version, and you can integrate it a little bit more cleanly into your car, and that's an option for you as well if you want a hardwire cable with the remote mute capabilities. Now, I know there's a lot of different cables and stuff that I just went over, so down in the video description, I'm going to link to all of the different cables that I'm talking about. Now, moving on to mounts, I've done a video talking all about the different mounting options, but some new information. For those of you guys who have the blend mount, there's actually a good solution that you can do with the Max 360's magnetic mount. It's the same one used on the IXE or the Redline EX. With this detector, if you take a look at the magnetic mount, the base right here where the detector actually connects onto, people have found that if you take the Uniden single suction cup mount, which is designed very similarly, and pop that section out, you can pop it into the blend mount connector for the Max 360C, and that will attach really well into your R7. That looks like a really cool solution. It's not something that I've been able to test myself because our beta copies of the R7 didn't ship with the single suction cup mount, and so it's not something that I've had a chance to mess around with, but a number of people have done this, and they've reported that it works well. For those of you guys who prefer visor mounts, the Radenso XP and SP visor mount actually also slips into the R7 like this, though not exactly perfectly. Let's take a closer look. You'll notice that the mount slides in and out of the detector like this, but it doesn't actually lock into place. If you take a look at the release button, it might be kind of hard to see, but if you take a look at the release button, it's actually popped down when this is in place, and then it actually pops back up when it goes out. It doesn't actually connect properly. However, there is a workaround for this. On the clip itself, if you shave this part down about 1/8 of an inch or so, once you do that, the R7 will be able to lock into place onto your visor mount. So for those of you guys who want a visor mount, that's a possible option for you. Now, diving back into the R7 itself, let's talk about BSM filtering real quick. They just made a change, as you guys know, with the new K-block feature that's designed to help filter out Honda and Acura falses, which is awesome. The detector will still false to some other cars. I noticed like Mazdas, for example, Jeeps, GM vehicles, and a couple others. So it does still false, but the K-block feature does seem to be helping quite a bit, which is really nice because those are some of the most common ones that I've seen myself. I do notice sometimes that there'll be Acuras that are maybe just outside that range. I had one today that was at like 24.190 or something. So some might get through, but that is something that's now available for the R7. Now, when I posted about this new feature, a lot of you guys have asked, hey, is this going to be coming to the R3? Is it going to be coming to the R3? And I don't know if it will be, but honestly, I think it would make total sense for Uniden to bring it out. It's just a software feature, and once they get everything dialed in on the R7, I think it would make total sense for them to bring the feature over to the R1 and the R3 as well. Now, speaking of BSM falses, it does look like the R7 is a little bit more susceptible to rear BSM falses than the R3 is with its front antenna only. For that reason, some people who have been able to drive with the R3 in a car that has BSM falses, like sometimes the Mazda CX-5 or some GM vehicles, it would work fine in the R3, but the R7 with its rear antenna, a lot of times will just consistently keep falsing to K-band because the rear antenna, it's able to pick up those rear BSM falses coming out of your own vehicle. There currently isn't any workaround for that other than, well, getting an R3 or something, but that is something to be aware of, and a number of you guys have been reporting and complaining about this particular issue. Now, moving on to the MRCD, there have been some improvements here with the R7, and specifically allowing it to scan lower down in the K-band frequency range. So this helps it catch more of the vehicles that transmit and use MRCD. However, we are still finding that the Radenso Pro M, the smaller detector, still does do a better job than the Unidens when it comes to detecting the MRCDs. Dukes just did some testing up in Edmonton and did some comparison against the Pro M, and the Pro M does a better job when it comes to detecting the MRCD. It gives you longer alert range, which is really important in these really close range encounters. And yes, the Radensos do still seem to be the best pick when it comes to the MRCDs. So you guys up in Canada, especially up in Edmonton, take note, the Pro M and the remote version, the RCM, do still seem to be the best picks for you guys specifically. Now, speaking of the lower frequency K-band range and kind of modified frequency ranges that the detector scanned for, there is a modification to band segmentation with the R7. If you take a look at the Ka band segmentation, you'll notice there's only 9 segments available, not 10. The upper limit for scanning on Ka band with the detector stops at 35.7. It doesn't go all the way up to 36 gigahertz. The reason that it's missing this extra 300 megahertz with what would be segment 10 on Ka band segmentation is because they had to take away the frequency range there and give it to K-band to give the K-band lower scanning frequency range, well, to make that available. So when you guys go take a look at your different Ka-band segments, if you notice that Ka-band segment 10 happens to be missing, now you know why. Moving on to the arrows for the detector. Some people have actually asked, why doesn't the detector have individual left and right arrows? Why are the side arrows pointing left and right? Well, this is true for any radar detector that uses arrows. Remember, the way these detectors work is they have not one, but 2 antennas. So you have one primary antenna and you have a rear antenna facing this way. If the signal is stronger up ahead, it lights up front arrow. If the signal is stronger back behind, it lights up rear arrow. If the signals are very similar in strength front and rear, it calls that side arrows. The detector has no ability to actually point left or right because there are no left-facing or right-facing antennas. There's just front or back, and side just means front and rear signal strength is very similar. The detector has no way of actually determining left versus right, and that's why. Now, moving on to auto lockouts. The detector is going to have the ability to have automatic GPS lockouts, a lot like the Escort detectors do. That feature is not yet available due to patent and licensing restrictions. Escort does currently hold the patent on automatic GPS lockouts, and they license out the ability for companies to do manual GPS lockouts. Now, as far as when that patent expires, there's a little bit of confusion, and I've asked about it to get some clarity as far as exactly when that patent expires. I believe it's around May or June of this year, but from what I understand, the code for the auto lockouts to be added to the R7, it's already been written, and so it's just a matter of time of waiting for the patent to expire, and then the Uniden engineers can make that update available to the R7, and boom, we have auto lockouts. Now, for those of you guys who have the R7 already and you want to learn how to program your detector, I have a tutorial on my website that explains all the different settings and options, gives you general recommendations as far as the settings that for a lot of people I would recommend. You can go in and it's kind of a baseline that you can go and fine tune and work upon. And then I'm also going to share my own settings that I run on my own R7. I'm going to be doing a video version of this coming soon as well, so for those of you guys who'd rather watch me explain everything instead of read over my website, that'll be available soon too. But in the meantime, you can check all that out there. Plus, whenever there's changes made to the firmware, new features being added, I can always update the article very easily. Something I can't really do with the video. I'd have to do the video all over again. So article's already available for you guys. Now, moving on to laser sensitivity with the detector. The R1 and the R3 were known for not having the greatest laser sensitivity. And a lot of people have asked, hey, has that improved with the R7? It's not something I'm particularly interested in testing, to be perfectly honest, because even if they have improved it, so what? You still need laser jammers if you want any semblance of reliable protection against laser. Even a detector with really good sensitivity, it can help maybe detect scatter in a couple instances, and there are a few rare instances when it can actually help you avoid a ticket, but it is in no way, shape, or form a reliable way to protect you against laser. And so even if they've improved the laser sensitivity somewhat, so there's a saying that I like, a difference that makes no difference makes no difference. And that's kind of where we're at here. We could go in and test it, and it's a little bit tricky to do laser testing just because there's going to be some handshake from the laser gun, and putting multiple radar detectors on the windshield is they'll be in different spots, so it's not quite a fair comparison. If you try to put it in the same spot, then again, handshake and differences from run to run with the car being in different spots on the road. And anyway, it's kind of a pain in the butt to test, and it's not something that even if we go through the effort of testing it, it will give us any sort of really useful information. The conclusion is still going to be, whether it's more sensitive or not, you still need laser jammers. And so it's not really worth investing the time and energy to go in and test and try to determine. And so people have asked about that, but it's not really something that I'm interested in doing. But if you guys would like to, you're more than welcome to, and I'd love to see the results of your testing. Now, finally, a lot of you guys have asked about Spectre immunity. Is the detector immune from being detected by radar detector detectors? Now, I've got a Spectre 3, which I picked up on eBay. You can see right there. And I did a little bit of testing with my beta version of the R7, and I did actually find it to be more detectable than the Uniden R1 and the R3. Now that said, that Spectre 3 seems to be more sensitive than the older Spectre Elite that I've tested with in the past, and some of you guys who've also since picked up Spectres, you're able to pick up detectors at farther ranges than I was able to in some of my videos, and it seems like for whatever reason the Spectre Elite that I was testing with, it's either less sensitive than some of the other models like the Spectre 3, maybe that Elite is less sensitive than other Spectre Elites, I'm not really sure, and so I want to do more testing with this, and so I've got my Spectre 3, I've got that Spectre Elite coming back, I've got my R7 here, and so far I've got 2 other retail R7s coming in that 2 of you guys have actually offered to send me specifically for testing. So I've got 3 R7s, I've got 2 Spectres, and I want to do a lot more testing, front, rear, different models, all that kind of stuff. I would love to have multiple copies of Spectre 3s and 4s and Elites and all that kind of stuff. So if I can get my hands on more Spectres, that would be awesome too. But for the time being, I've got 2 different copies of Spectres and 3 different copies of the R7, and this weekend I'm actually going to be going and setting some time aside to go specifically do some R7 testing with the Spectre with different models and different copies of the detector. Now the detectors that we have, the beta ones, they were more detectable than the R3, but we've heard that the production ones may have some changes being made to make them less detectable than our beta versions. And so I want to test the beta one that I have and 2 other retail copies, at least 2, and see are there any differences or not. But either way, I'm really curious to see with the retail copies of the R7 what kind of results we're going to see. And again, I'll be doing that testing this coming weekend, and so I'll post the results next week. But yeah, I guess that's it for now. So you can see a lot of small topics. I'm sure you guys have more questions that I missed. I'd asked you guys on Facebook and on Twitter, if you have any questions, and I was perusing the forums and the comments, and just to see, all the most common questions that you guys have been asking, and wanted to put them all together in one video. But I hope this helped answer some of the questions that you guys had. If you have some additional questions, please feel free to ask down in the comment area. When I'm available, I may go in and help respond to some of those. But other than that, yeah, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to get notified of all the upcoming videos. I've got a bunch more planned for the R7, setup guides, more testing, things like that to come. So great. Hope you guys are doing well, and I'll see you in the next video.